Welcome to Module 3 of the Psychological Profiling course here at Salt Lake Community College. I'm Mike King, and today we're going to be focusing on expanding traditions. You will receive some additional instruction. You'll also have a case study on the Robert Ben Rhodes case. Robert Ben Rhodes is a serial killer that Greg Cooper and I had the opportunity to work his case over many years. Had the opportunity to interview this individual. He is probably the best example of a sexual sadist that I encountered during my career, and if there were a living devil, he would fit the bill perfectly, and there'll be more information on him as we move forward. In the previous module, we talked briefly about the traditional forms of evidence. This particular module will go into more detail into that. We'll talk about physical and forensic evidence as the first and primary form of traditional evidence. Fingerprints, footprints, physical evidence left at a crime scene, forensic evidence including electronic and cyber evidence. Oftentimes this is something that is relied on in most criminal cases, especially when we look at sexual assault and body fluids that are left at the scene, in homicide cases with blood and blood spatter, etc. We also will explore circumstantial evidence. The idea that if A happened and B happened, then the result would certainly be C. There are many cases where people are convicted on several forms of evidence, one being circumstantial, that it just made good sense that this person was responsible for the result that happened. A good example might be that a victim was found with a gunshot wound. A forensic examination of the bullet slug inside of the victim matched a weapon that was found in a pawn shop that was pawned by an individual, and when doing a search warrant of their car, there was blood that was matched to the victim. That would be a circumstantial and forensic case. Eyewitness. This is a terribly tricky situation for law enforcement because people can view something entirely different based on their own background, their own prejudices, etc. I remember as a young rookie in the police academy, we were sitting in class one day after lunch. Everyone was tired from a big lunch and sitting in a long, boring lecture when all of a sudden the door burst open. A gunman entered the room and he fired 2 shots at the instructor, who very theatrically fell to the ground, and the gunman fled. The instructor jumped up and said that it was just a test, but then he began to ask the class members, all of us sworn police officers, what the suspect looked like that fired the weapon. And we received the suspect information being tall, short, heavy-set, thin, white, Hispanic, all from the same group of professionals. When the instructor asked about the weapon that was used, it was everything from a .25 caliber weapon pulled from a belt to a .44 Magnum. So eyewitness can be really challenging, and again, we should not have any case decided based only on eyewitness. Confession, what a wonderful thing for law enforcement. Too often, though, we have to be cautious about even confession, as we described in the previous module. And then, of course, the newest form of evidence, which we are studying in this course, and that is behavioral evidence. The key to this module is to keep in mind that to successfully bring a case to conclusion in court, and of course in the investigation, we need to have more than one form of evidence alone in support of what that finding and decision is. It is incumbent upon us to try to combine as many of those. But you'll find that sometimes behavior is more accurate as far as assessing the crime than any of the others. Ali bin Abi Talib said, "A man's behavior is the index of the man, and his discourse is the index of his understanding." The bottom line to this is our actions are exhibited of things that we have already thought out in our mind. The devil didn't just make us do it. Eyes see and ears hear what is already in the mind is an Oriental proverb, Sun Yupi Chi, that teaches us and reminds us that things are created spiritually before they're ever created physically. In other words, we don't just have things happen. In our mind, we somehow solve the problem and make a decision before we ever physically act it out. Criminal investigative analysis, this idea of behavioral profiling, is something that employs a systematic approach. It isn't the voodoo witch magic that we see on television. It is a process that is systematic and involves forethought, understanding, and experience. It is not only a science, but an art. It identifies and interprets the behavioral aspects of crime, and then it applies investigative principles, disciplines, experience, and education in helping solve that. We spoke in Module 2 for a moment about one of the problems facing law enforcement. We call it the 3 C's: communication, coordination, and cooperation. Sadly, in many law enforcement agencies and between agencies, there is too little communication, coordination, cooperation. In the last 10 years, we have seen this change dramatically with the incorporation of fusion centers, intelligence centers, multidisciplinary task forces, and we're getting better at this, but it continues to be an area where we have difficulty. In law enforcement agencies, and I would submit that in every discipline, there are people who are more interested in being the hero or the one who solves a crime, and so they keep information to themselves rather than sharing to a greater body in order to have more minds helping solve a problem. There is a time and a place to keep information classified and secret, but we have to be very cautious about how that works, and we have to be very open-minded that other minds can help us more quickly solve problems. I hope you enjoy this module, and as we move into the Robert Ben Rhodes case, I'll do a quick video clip of some of that investigation.